Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. My name is Megan Tennant, and today we are talking about where to start your story. Sometimes I'm like a whisper in a riot, but I grow stronger, keep believing. Now, first things first, huge shout out to Jennifer T. Jarrett. She is a patron of mine. She is wonderful. She is a writer. Go follow her. I will link her Twitter in the description down below. And she requested this in the Patreon suggestion box, and I'm excited. This is a great topic. So thank you, Jennifer, for recommending it. So the question of where to start your story is kind of a tough one to tackle because it sort of implies that we're asking where to stop the needle on a time machine, when the reality is that outside of the time machine, there's nothing but whitewashed sands, and it's our responsibility as writers to fill in those sands with just enough color and details to make for a captivating tale, and not anything more than that. And if that sounds horrifyingly difficult, that's okay because it is. But this is ultimately less a question of where to start our story and more a question of what needs to happen right after we start our story. And I'm not gonna be covering prologues because if you're writing a prologue, you are committing to writing 2 first chapters basically, so if you have a prologue or if you don't, that shouldn't affect the contents of this video at all. And I'm not gonna cover want and need in super specific detail. If you wanna know more about prologues or wants versus need, I did videos on both of those things. I will link them in the description down below and in the end cards. What I am going to be covering in this video is what your character needs before page 1, why you need to start with an ordinary world, the secret to making the ordinary world interesting, and where does the inciting incident fit in? So first up, what does your character need before page 1? So as audiences, we want to come into the story feeling like we just stepped into these characters' lives right when things are about to get interesting. We don't want to feel like the characters just sprouted up around us like deformed mushrooms. Fun fact, fungi is more closely related to animals than it is to plants. Yes, it's very important that you know that. Not for writing or for this video, but for life, probably. Anyways, for us to feel like we are walking into these characters' lives, they have to have a pre-existing life for us to walk into. Now, you will have intuitively already thought up a lot of these things, like you probably already thought of whether or not they have a job beforehand, or friends, or family, and most importantly, whether or not they have a cat. But a lot of new writers forget 4 important things that we need to figure out before the book even starts. That is want, need, a problem, and the misbelief. Now, need will fly under the radar for most of the book, but you kind of need to nail it down to figure out the want and the misbelief and the problem and make sure everything lines up properly. But the other 3 are going to be visible gears in the machine that is your plot, probably from page 1. So here's the breakdown. Before your story even starts, your character has a problem, and they obviously want their perceived solution to that problem. And so your audience's very first question is gonna be, why haven't they solved the problem yet? And in answer, you have to slap them across the face with your character's fatal flaw, their misbelief. That's what's keeping them from solving this problem, and it's probably been keeping them from solving this problem for years. And that's what we're gonna watch them overcome throughout the story and throughout their character arc. Because here's the thing, if your character doesn't start out with a problem and a strong desire to fix that problem, they're gonna have no reason to change. Humans, and for that matter, most biological beings, hate change with a passion, and will therefore only seek it out when their current situation is bringing them great discomfort. If you start out your story with your protagonist living their best life, they're gonna slam their door in the face of that inciting incident. Or maybe even worse, they're gonna walk straight into the dangers of the unknown against all logic and all instincts of self-preservation, and the audience is gonna get whipped in the face with the tail ends of the strings that you're using to drag this character forward. Okay, so you nailed down your want and your need and your misbelief and your problem and all of that good stuff. Now, what's all of this about an ordinary world, and why does it matter? Our pasts color the world around us. Is my blue the same as your blue? It doesn't matter. What matters is that both of us associate the color blue with oceans and skies and the Twitter logo. But what if the main character comes from a world where the color of the sky is the same color as their blood? They will view that color in a completely different way than we do. As humans, our skills at emphasizing allow us to take a character's eyes and turn them into lenses. So we can look at their world in a lot of the same ways that they do. But to do this properly, we need to know what colors their worlds are painted in. And besides that, the inciting incident is gonna throw your character's life and plans into complete chaos. And to appreciate that, we need to know what those plans were and what their life was like before the inciting incident. Evolutionarily, we crave stories not because the plot is interesting, but because there's a part of our brain that's screaming. What if we somehow ended up in a scenario where a giant showed up and told us we're a wizard? We need to know how to react. Okay, no part of our brain actually expects that specific thing to happen. Some of us have grown up and finally accepted the cold hard truth that our cat probably ate the owl or something. But the thing is, our brain doesn't see things in simple terms, and thus, it douses us in dopamine when we read Harry Potter, not because it wants to know how we would handle finding out that we're a wizard, but because it wants to know how Harry handles being thrown into unknown situations and being faced with a nemesis and having someone in a position of power over you that has a grudge against you and is treating you unfairly because of that. This means you can't really start your story with your inciting incident because we as the audience can't care about the inciting incident without a character. So you need to start a few paces before the inciting incident. But now we hit a bit of an issue because humans have short attention spans. And although we need an established character, we're also not gonna sit through chapters and chapters worth of their ordinary world if that ordinary world is boring. And a lot of debut novels would actually read better if the author had just cut out the first 1 to 3 chapters. So then, how do you make the ordinary world interesting? So at this stage you might be thinking, my ordinary world is already interesting. It's set in space, and who doesn't want to read about space? This is an excuse that a lot of sci-fi and fantasy writers accidentally fall into, and I myself might have been guilty of that. But I've got bad news for you. If your character is bored, your readers are gonna be bored. In a pre-beta version of Aletheia, Chapter 5 has 736 stabbing a diseased person in the eye. Now surely that sounds exciting and jarring. I mean, that's what I thought when I wrote it. But her inner thoughts and outer actions portrayed boredom, because this is something that she's had to do a lot of throughout her life. And in my head, I thought it would be interesting to portray boredom because that's something unexpected. But here's the thing, the audience connects with the character's emotions. We feel those same emotions, and that extends to boredom. And that was what one of my very first betas pointed out to me. So I took that section and I rewrote it. I changed it so she was no longer bored. It was still jarring to her. I'm here pulling the curtain back from my writing. This is terrifying. But I went and changed that. And my next betas got to that part and they were much more interested in it than the first bit of betas were. That simple change in how she felt about the situation changed how they felt about the situation. Fun fact, if you want to read that rewrite of Chapter 5, chapters 1 through 5 of Aletheia are up for free on my website. You can go find them in the link in the description down below. Okay, so now you're probably wondering, how the hell do I show the character's ordinary world without them viewing it as ordinary? And the answer is to start your story with an eventful day that leads straight into or causes the inciting incident. Now, the best way to unearth what this out of the normal event should be is to look at your character's problem and their want. Because by having the stressful event be a snake pit that your character is actively entering in pursuit of their want, you'll not only show the audience that your character has a want, but you'll also show that they have drive to pursue that want. Now, you will find that what these events are and what brings them on is heavily influenced by genre. So sci-fi very often has characters entering the snake pits on command of a superior. Fantasy seems to lean more towards characters going into the snake pit on their own accord in search of treasure or vengeance. And dystopian stories often start on days where the corrupted government is throwing people into the snake pit, and our protagonist is either hoping not to be chosen or knows that it's their turn to be on the sharp end of the snakes. you know, because there's scenarios where they'd be on the soft end of the snakes. That's a thing. So let's talk examples. Number 1, a test or trial, often one that the protagonist has been preparing for months or even years. For example, in Skyward, we have Spence's pilot exam, where the results of it are the inciting incident. And in Horizon Zero Dawn, we have the proving ceremony that ends in the inciting incident. Number 2, first day of a new job or first day of school. An example of this, Twilight starts on the first day of class at a new school, which is not the inciting incident but does lead to it. Number 3, a competition. A great example of not only this specific one, but just good ways to start a story in general is Lifelike. Lifelike starts on the day of a robot deathmatch. This is something that our main character has done before, but at the same time, it's still stressful and we're on the edge of our seats because she's stressed out, there's still dangers, and it's still exciting to her, it's something she loves, and as an added nice little bonus, she's there in pursuit of her want. And then this ends with her manifesting, which is the inciting incident. Number 4, the day of a ceremony or choosing. For example, Enclave, which I'm too lazy to pull off of the shelf, starts on the day of the main character's naming. And then of course we have another example to rival Lifelike and how well done it was. You can judge me even harder for this one because I own 5 different copies of it and I'm still too lazy to pull one of them off the shelf. That is The Hunger Games, of course, where The Hunger Games starts on the day of the reaping. So we have this imminent, stressful event hanging over our heads. We know it's coming, so that's gonna keep us in our seats. And number 5, we have a sudden or strange announcement or meeting. So an example of this is Six of Crows, which starts with one gang meeting another. And another example of this is my very own Aletheia. Aletheia starts out with 736 finding out that a meeting has been called. The last time this happened was in response to a riot. These generally do not mean good things. And so it's an impending, stressful event. They know it's not going to end well for them. And now an example of a book that lacks anything resembling these. Daughter of Smoke and Bone. Now don't get me wrong, I overall enjoyed this book, but I came so close to DNFing. This book starts out in the character's ordinary world, but it's too ordinary. It's just the character going to class. And as much as her ordinary world is pretty different from our ordinary world, nothing that exciting really happens, and there's no real hint at when we're gonna get hit with the inciting incident. Now, where does the inciting incident fit into all of this? So generally the inciting incident happens at about 5% to 10% of the novel, which is usually around chapter 2 if you have standard length chapters. The Hunger Games chapter 2 starts right after Prim's name was called. In Harry Potter, Harry starts getting letters from no one in what is essentially chapter 2, because they call the prologue chapter 1, so I'm calling their chapter 3 chapter 2, Fight Me. And in Aletheia, the meeting where the prophet reveals the impending population cut and the mysterious new Division 8 is in chapter 2. Again, you can read that for free on my website. This isn't a plug, you're a plug. But yes, you'll find that tons of books have their inciting incidents in chapter 2, because that's just enough time for us to get context, get to know the character, and be interested enough to be hooked in by the inciting incident and still know what's going on. What about the outliers? Some stories do start in media res, which is a Latin term that means starting in the middle, and they start right at the inciting incident, but they're pretty few and far in between, and they're very hard to pull off. I don't know if I'd recommend you try it unless your story just doesn't work any other way. A few examples of this are Shatter Me. Chapter 1 sees Adam thrown into Juliet's cell after she's been there alone for years. In the 100, we start out with Clark finding out that 100 of the delinquents are being sent to the ground. And in Girls of Paper and Fire, chapter 1 sees our protagonist being taken away to be a girl of paper. Now, what did these have in common? Well, 2 of the 3 involve people who are imprisoned, so given their lack of freedom, it's not super surprising that the authors didn't feel it would fit to have a pre-inciting incident, exciting event taking place. But overall, what all of these share is that to squeeze in the shreds of context and characterization that we need to truly appreciate the inciting event, these stories rely very heavily on exposition. The 100, in the show at least, let's continue pretending that the book doesn't exist, uses outright narration. Shatter Me uses an art-heavy method that not many writers could pull off, and some argue that even Shatter Me didn't pull off. And Girl of Paper and Fire delayed the inciting incident by 10 long pages of context and grounding that pushed many readers to the limits of their patience, and I myself would have DNF'd if I wasn't listening to it in audiobook form while I was in the shower. So these three do sort of pull off their in media res starts, but it's not something I'd recommend to the average writer. Maze Runner is an example of this, done in a way that was less than successful. Page 1 shows us Thomas waking up in the elevator going up to the Glade. We get no input into his ordinary world, no context, no baseline for his decisions. He is a blank page. And for a lot of readers, that showed a lot, and I mean a lot of book reviews had readers saying that they just couldn't connect to Thomas. And a lot of that is because of this in media res opening where we have no baseline and no context for his ordinary world. And in this case, I can't really blame the author. This was an artistic decision. It's the only way that the plot twist could have possibly worked. But as with all artistic decisions that push normal storytelling techniques to their limits, there is always a high chance that there are going to be readers that it just doesn't mesh with. And this was the case with Maze Runner. So in conclusion, my best advice to you is to start out your story in the character's ordinary world where something slightly out of the ordinary is happening. Have that be your chapter 1, and then in chapter 2, right off the bat, maybe even as a cliffhanger to chapter 1, slap the audience with the inciting incident. And that was it for this video. If you want to learn more about prologues or want versus need, then check out the links in the description down below. I'll also put them in the end cards if you just wait till the end. Again, the first 5 chapters of Aletheia are up for free on my website, link in the description. And thank you so much for watching. As always, I will see you in the next video.
Say you believe in your belief.